Hello and welcome to Super Respectable. My name is Toshio, and with me is my friend David Lewis from the
Hello.
Netherlands. Hello, David.
Hello, Toshio. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. We're doing something unique today, right? We're doing opposite time zones. So, like for you, it's early morning, and for me, it's really early morning. But
Yeah,
we're
hats
trying it
off
out.
to you, Tosh, for pulling in the all-nighter here for this podcast. You're really doing something special.
Usually, we should let our listener in Delhi know. usually, we we do it the other way around. Usually, Dave's very accommodating for me because I live on the other side of the world, so it's kind of around 9 o'clock in the morning for me, which is sort of dinner time. But since I've been fasting for Ramadan, I've been staying up all night, so it just makes sense that we found a time that sort of works.
Are you going to need some toilet breaks during this episode? Because it looks like you're drinking a gigantic,
Yeah.
huge tub of water right
So
now.
that's thank you so much. So for those people who don't know, like you can't eat or drink water from sunrise to sunset. So from sunset to sunrise, pretty much all I do is drink water as much as I can. But I'll be okay.
Okay, okay.
Don't worry, don't worry. How's it going? Just in general in life?
Yeah, it's going. The MBA is pretty intense right now. I'm doing statistics, which is a painful subject. I think
Uh,
it's actually more painful than accounting.
oh, I was just gonna ask you. Oh, okay. So so more
Yeah,
painful.
you have
Um,
more pain to come.
because I have an accounting exam this week, and I was telling you like I can start it at any point before Sunday, and I get 2 days to finish it. That's 48 hours. So once the clock starts. So I've
Mm.
been kind of like running the clock out because I'm trying to get feedback from like I'm not actively asking for feedback, but I'm just on a group and I can see what some of the advice and tips are.
I see. So we'll send this to the admin of your program
To the
afterwards for their
registrar office.
attention. Yeah.
But what are you getting the statistics? Like, is it making sense to you, or is it completely foreign?
Yeah.
We took
I
a
mean,
statistics class in second year
we
university.
did, and
Okay.
I piggybacked on my extremely intelligent friend Dave Hart.
Okay.
I had the good fortune of partnering with him in stats, so I don't think I learned too much aside from
Yeah.
making a good partnership with people who have strength that you don't.
Um,
And yeah, I made it
okay.
through.
What was it that we were using? SPSS? Is that what it
SPSS.
is?
Yeah, thankfully we don't have to use that awful software. We're using Excel,
Yeah.
which I don't know how familiar or how often you use Excel. I'm a newbie to it, and it's pretty sad that a 36-year-old is just getting
No,
started with Excel.
well, no, not at all, because I use Excel pretty commonly on from a work, but I don't know all the formulas and all the special things. I know how to input
Yeah,
information. I just use it to my preferences, not to the actual way it was built. But I like
it's
color
insane the
coding.
amount of things you can do.
Crazy.
At first, I'm like, what's the point of this thing? It's a big, huge sheet of just
Yeah.
nonsense.
Crap. Yeah. And
And
then
now
but
there's all these fun things you can do.
isn't it funny that so like when you work in groups, you always get like you're always wanting to like partner with like the smartest person so you can do
Mm,
the least amount of work.
yeah.
And then when they
Well,
say that the
yeah.
marks will be the same, you're like, that's even better, man. Like
Fantastic. That's the great thing about business school because like I think
teamwork.
60-70% of the coursework is in groups.
Yeah.
And they're pretty good about I guess they make some kind of effort to have a nice mix of people in your group. So
Yeah.
there's different strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah.
Um, so I'm pretty lucky. The group that we have right now is well balanced, emotionally, mentally, intellectually,
Ha- Um,
physically.
do you think
Yeah.
in a year or so when you finish the MBA, you look back and you'll think it was a good decision, or are you just already like this was why'd I do this? Why'd I put myself through school?
No, I'm enjoying it. I think my main hang up is the length of the program. It's
Yeah.
very long. Um, I know it's an executive program, so they have to extend it, and it's just weekends every other weekend.
Yeah.
Um, I still feel they could achieve their goals by doing
Compressing
it
it.
in a year and a half, maybe, or 14 months or something. There's a lot of, I don't know, I don't want to say too much, but like I think that for me, the most valuable things are things like accounting and the challenging subjects. When I'm really struggling and getting frustrated, that's when I know I'm learning.
Yeah.
Whereas things that are more fluffy, like leadership development and personal journey
Yeah.
scores, and do these online quizzes to see how your psychopath metrics are,
Yeah.
which is
The l-
important for MBA students.
yeah. Pretty much anyone who does an MBA is a
MBA
psychopath.
is like you're psychopath. Yeah, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
Um, so of course it's good to have a well-rounded program, but I definitely find a lot of value in the accounting and these aspects. So I'm like,
That's
just give
good.
me this stuff, get me out of here.
Well, I was just thinking, like, I don't know. I mean, it's definitely interesting. It's not something I would pursue as a career. I was just thinking if I was an accountant, I'd kill myself because this is insane. Like, like this is craziness. Just as a module, it's enough for me, and I'm pretty happy when I'll be done with it. But I could never. I'm pretty excited to leave it behind. But I definitely agree with you. If you're learning something and it's kind of creating a little bit of a headache, and you're having to kind of really engage with it, then at least you're challenging yourself, and that's always good to do, right?
But
Give it
like
a try.
the great thing now,
Mm,
to be doing education in this day and age,
this
as
age.
opposed to possibly the Carleton time, is I'm doing a lot of like educating on YouTube. Like if I don't understand something, I'm very visual, so I'll just go on and like type in something very specific, like what is
Yeah.
a multiple regression line, and explain to me what the output means.
Yeah.
And there's for sure always going to be like 5 or 6 videos to watch, so you can like teach
Good.
yourself.
Yeah.
So whereas before, where I'd struggle through things,
No YouTube when we were
that's
going to college. Yeah.
you probably have to go through the library and make a book request and try and go through some dodgy Wikipedia article if it wasn't fully fleshed out at that point.
Yeah.
But now it's pretty good if you have the motivation and the inclination to teach yourself some stuff. It's all there.
Yeah. No, definitely. Good for you. It's a good way. I think keep with it, and at least it's something to do in addition to your life. So I don't think you'll ever regret it, but slow and steady wins the race, right?
Slow and
So
steady, slow and steady. Yeah. How long is your program?
14 months.
It's a good
Which
amount of time.
that was actually one of the reasons I took it. So I have to distinguish to our listener viewer, like Dave is at the University of Rotterdam doing his EMBA, which is I think how many months? Like 2 months, 2 years, 24 months, maybe less.
Just under 2 years. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm at Quantic, which is like an online school, and I'm 14 months. And that was actually one of the reasons I took it was because I wanted to learn, but I didn't want to learn forever, and I wanted it to be flexible with my schedule. And to be honest, I got so many things happening that like a 2 year or a 3 year thing is just like impossible. I needed to work at the same time and do it remotely, but 14 months seemed okay for me. So
Nice.
that's how much I commit to everything. 14 months is my cap.
Yeah. No matter what.
Yeah. So it's my week to
Cool.
present, and so actually, this is honestly like I came up with this topic the other day. I'm going to change my background in lieu of the topic, but
Oh wow.
I was bored around like 5 or 6 o'clock on Sunday afternoon, so I was going through our TV channels, and Titanic came up.
Oh, there's
the,
a
mo-
Titanic one. Okay, very nice.
the movie, and then I was like, oh yeah, that happened. And I used to be super interested in like the history behind the actual sinking of the ship and all this stuff. I remember when I was like a kid and when the movie came, I was totally into it, like very much. And I thought, it'd be interesting to go back into the history a little bit and look into some interesting facts around the sinking and just discuss. And then I'll try not to mention the movie. That really didn't have anything to do with my topic. But
Never seen it.
are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Dave! It was like the thing of 1990, whatever, wasn't it? Wasn't that like the
Yeah.
cultural
Yeah, no.
phenomenon of the year? Well,
I just saw the length of it and I'm like, why would you watch a 4 hour movie where you know the ending?
because Leonardo DiCaprio was in it. That's why. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean,
Well, what are you thinking about?
yeah. So, yo, wow, you didn't see it. That's crazy. I remember the whole
I've
hype.
seen like bits here or there, like when it's on TV or stuff, like I'll watch like a few minutes, but I've never sat down and watched the whole movie.
Yeah, it's long. It's definitely long. It's I remember that it was such a big deal that like you couldn't get tickets for the first X number of weeks, and in every cinema, everyone was talking about
Yeah.
it. People at school were
How many
like,
times have you seen it?
like 4 or 5 times probably in my life or something like that. It's like 24
Wow.
hours. We have it on VHS. VHS, VHS,
Okay.
VHS is what we use, not Blu-ray, DVD, VHS. 4 generations, 3 generations back.
Wow.
Actually, I think we have it on DVD too. But yeah, it was a but you remember the hoopla
Of
around it.
course, there was a huge craze.
Yeah, it was insane. And like I remember before the movie even came out, I was just fascinated with this idea that there was this ship. It hit an iceberg. It's in the middle of the ocean, like it sank. Like it's just sitting there. And so I don't know if you were into kind of archaeology and wreckages and ships and all that kind of cool stuff. But I remember, and the fact that it was like off the Canadian coast really interested me as well. But
Canadian director, a lot of Canadian aspects.
Canadian aspects of it. Did you have a little like what were some of the things you were interested in, kind of in that pre-teenage years? Like, were anything for me? It was Titanic and astronomy. Those are the two things I like nerded out on.
Probably video games and sports. Pretty consistent. It was just video games, playing soccer and playing hockey.
In 1995, 96, what was the video game console that was the one that was out there? Was it Nintendo? Sega Genesis?
I don't know if it was at the point of Nintendo 64.
I don't think so, man. That came a little bit later.
That's a little bit later. So I think it was still Super Nintendo era, maybe the first PlayStation.
Yeah.
I had all the Nintendo ones, so I annoyed my parents a lot to try and get the new systems. And
yeah. Now it's like I remember. Do you remember the controls were so easy? They're up, down, left, right, A and B or whatever, right? And like it was for the Nintendos, and I mean it was a very like two-dimensional. Like very simplified.
You just mash the pad a lot, and hopefully something good happens.
But do you still play video games now?
I go in and out. So I have a big addictive problem with the video games. Like, I'll play it for a long time. It's always only like the sports ones. Like I'll play the FIFA or the soccer games.
Oh, okay.
And I can't stop, so I'll have to delete the thing and then erase all the memory. So it makes me demoralized.
Yeah.
I
never really got into video games. I mean, there were times in my youth I would play them for a little bit here and there, but I don't think I've actually played a video game in like 6 years, maybe even a decade or more. So
that's good. It's a huge waste of time.
So many things.
It's a huge, yeah.
Yeah. But anyways, we digress. So I was watching Titanic and I was sitting there crying and like the first thing that I noticed was I was like, Leonardo DiCaprio looks so young in this movie. And that was like, so then I started, I didn't watch the entire movie, but then I thought, hey, it'd be interesting is looking at some of the facts around Titanic and its sinking and kind of seeing if I can stump you or get you amazed on a couple of the things. So I looked through a bunch of them.
Stump me.
And I thought we could discuss some of them. So just a little background, if you didn't know, for people. Obviously, you can see. It's
a podcast, Tosh. It's a podcast.
Oh, okay. We can have someone describe it. There's a ship sinking behind me. It's not real. It's a picture. Okay, so Titanic was a ship that was sailing on its maiden voyage from Southampton in England, Dave's ancestral home country, to New York in America, and unfortunately it sank. It hit a huge iceberg, and this huge ship just sank off the coast of Canada. And so what happened specifically was on the night of April 14th, 1912. So this is right 1912, like pre-World War I by 2 years. It left New York. I left Southampton. It's heading to New York. Sorry. On the night of on the night of the 14th, it hits. It's sailing from Southampton to New York, and it hits an iceberg, and then within 3 hours, the ship sinks. So that's one of the first interesting things is that in the movie, it was pretty much an entire 3 hours plus, but in reality, in the 3 hours, the thing hit an iceberg and sank. So that's a really short amount of time for something to happen. And then so it hits at around 11:40, and around 2:20 a.m. On the 15th, obviously the next day, it completely disappears underneath the surface of the Atlantic Ocean. Over 1,500 people die, which is almost 2/3 of the people on board. It was only 370 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. So in like current day nautical miles, it's really not that far. Ships or even helicopters or boats or planes can get there pretty quickly. But at that time, back in 1912, it's a long distance. If you can see, let me describe this. podcast. The ship actually, what happens is like the ship hits the iceberg. It goes up. I'm trying to describe something visual while doing 45 degrees or 650 degrees. And then because of the weight and the size of the ship, it actually breaks into two. And so there, the gap between the bow, and the stern is about 2,000 feet in the seabed. So when it went down in the water, there's a huge difference between where the front of the ship and the bottom of the ship land. It's kind of interesting because of how
Hmm.
big this thing was. Um, so one interesting fact was that even though it sank in 1912, it was actually discovered, the wreckage, in 1985, almost 73 years later. And the reason for this was the technology really hadn't existed yet, and it was actually found accidentally by a crew that was on the side in that part of the world. So it's interesting. So for 73 years, it's been sitting on the bottom of the ocean.
What were they doing, this crew? What were they looking for?
Great question. I don't know. I don't
Hmm.
know. We'll look into it. I'm not sure. It didn't say at that part, but I would assume like archaeological work or marine biology work,
Hmm.
whatever crews do in that part of the world. Um,
Hmm.
but here's some more interesting facts. Okay, Dave. How much do you think it cost to build the Titanic back in 1912 dollars?
In 1912 dollars.
Yeah, U.S. dollars. 1912
Uh,
U.S. dollars.
okay, so in 1912 dollars, $1 million is a huge amount of money.
Huge amount of money.
So $1 million.
Uh, in the
A
range.
bit more.
In the range. It was $7.5 million,
7.5. Okay.
which is pennies for modern day boats and cruise lines and ships now. But back in 1912, $7.5 million built that entire ship, which is crazy, right? People buy like private yachts for that much, or luxury boats and stuff for themselves for
Yeah, but
that
you need
much.
to find out what that is in today dollars.
It's I know, I wrote it down. It's
Oh.
$183 million, which is crazy amount. It took 2 years to build. It was built in England. Thousands of people were building on it. A number of people died during the building of this ship, but it was meant to be this huge, gigantic force that had never been seen before, and it was to open this passage between the two countries and travel. So it was its maiden voyage. Interestingly enough, uh, um, it had the number of lifeboats that Titanic was equipped to carry was 64, but the number of lifeboats that it actually carried was 20. So there was actually a 44
Ooh.
lifeboat difference that it could have done. And on the first lifeboat that got filled once it got hit, only 28 people were on it when it had a capacity of 65. So two problems there. We could have had more lifeboats, and we could have put more people on that first boat. And if you watch the movie, which Dave didn't because he was too cool with his video games and his sports,
Mm-hmm.
you see that the people who got on the lifeboat first were like people in first class, pretty much like the rich people, you know. So I mean, there was more room for more rich people. I don't know why they didn't max it out, but whatever. The maximum number of people the Titanic could have carried, as passengers and crew, is about 3,500 people, but the number of people that it actually carried was 2,200. So that's okay. I mean, I guess there were less people that didn't come on board, or they didn't sell all the tickets, or I'm not sure what
Mm.
the deficit was, but it wasn't at full capacity when it departed. Uh, um, so as I was saying at the beginning, that 3 hour mark is how long it took for the ship to sink, and so that's 160 minutes. And so what exactly happened was that the ship was going through a very heavy passage between the Atlantic. And if you know anything about weather patterns and boats in that part of the world, is that
Huge amount.
I'm an expert. Is that it's so cold off the coast of Newfoundland and kind of that part of the Atlantic that icebergs are very, very common. And actually, one thing I learned in science, did you learn about icebergs and the water patterns and all that stuff, like Geography 10 or whatever? No. Yes,
It's quite possible that we were taught that. I don't remember any of it.
because you were doing your video games, right?
Absolutely, in class.
No, the thing about icebergs, they say, is that you only see a little bit of it on the top. The majority of its mass is under the water, and and the water obviously is very cold. So the Titanic actually, it was when it hit the iceberg and it was sinking, the water, it was -2 degrees. So a lot of people actually froze to death in the water as well because of its cold. And at the same time, they were saying that the iceberg was anywhere between 50 to 100 feet above water, but it's believed that it could have been 200 to 400 feet below water, which is
Mm.
crazy to think. So there's a lot, a lot there that's not showing. And so they're sailing in the middle of the night. They see an iceberg way too late, and they're trying to get the ship to turn and not hit it, but it hits. And one of the reasons they think that the crew didn't spot the iceberg in time is because they didn't have the binoculars that's required of the two guys who are at the top. What do you call it? Pigeon's nest, or no,
Sure.
yeah, it's the top part of the ship where back in the day people used to be able to get a full view of what's coming up ahead, and so
Eagle's nest?
Eagle's Nest, I think that could have been it. And so the two guys, the ship's the two officers who were in charge of there didn't have the binoculars, and so they couldn't see very far. And the reason for this was that the ship's second officer was replaced at the last minute and forgot to give the key to the locker that housed the binoculars. So somebody else was supposed to take over, but they forgot to hand over the keys, which had the binoculars in them. And some historians have speculated that if they had the binoculars, they could have seen the berg and they wouldn't have hit it. Whatever. History always speculates here and there. But interestingly enough, the key for that locker resurfaced at an auction in 2010, and it was sold for $130,000
What?
because of historical value. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
By the way, I was wrong. Eagle's Nest is where Hitler lived, so it's not that.
Yeah, definitely not that.
Not that. No.
Let's we'll put a big disclaimer on our description.
Yeah. It wasn't Hitler's house.
Definitely, but that's an interesting topic too. I know you and I, we both share interest for a while, or the world wars, the great wars in terms of history. Yeah. So maybe we could do that for another episode.
Another time.
So the ship hits. It takes 3 hours to sink. People are trying to get on these lifeboats. Not everyone makes it. Some people jump into the water. At the end of the day, about 32% of the passengers on board survived, but 53% who could have survived. 53% of people could have survived, given the number of spaces available on lifeboats, but didn't. So that's kind of sad that more people could have done it. Yeah.
The lifeboat thing, since they were hundreds of miles off the coast, I don't really know how a 1912 lifeboat would have worked. Were they just sort of paddling their way to shore?
I think it was more that you'd be on the lifeboats until rescue boats would come in and get you. At least you wouldn't be in the water, because if you watch the movie, one of the saddest scenes is when Leonardo DiCaprio's in the water and he's holding on to the woman he loves. And he actually got her onto a piece of wood or plank, or I think it's a door, and just to give her space. But if he gets on, it'll sink. So he's sitting there holding her hand, and he's like, "I won't let go, I won't let go." But then he freezes to death, and then he lets go, and he sinks to the bottom.
So you saved me 3 hours right there.
Yeah, that's pretty much the thesis of the movie. So, so this boat sinks, and actually, it's right now, currently, like as we speak, it's 12,600 feet underneath the wreckage. Underneath the ocean surface, and the bow. Am I saying that correctly? I guess the front part of the ship, the bow.
The bow sounds more correct.
The bow of the Eagle's Nest, sure. And
the
bow goes because it's the tip of the boat. Because it's going so quickly at the bottom, it's actually 18 meters into the bed of the sea. So on the surface of the thing. So 18 meters is a huge amount of distance. It actually has cracked into the surface of the sea, which is pretty cool. I mean, from a geographical point of view. So when they started doing tours down there, not tourist tours, but you know what I'm saying, when they started doing archaeological tours, they actually had to send a number of like little robots and submarines down there, and they found that the entire area of wreckage wasn't in one spot. It was over a distance of 3 by 5 miles, because of water would move things to other places. The thing split into two. A lot of the debris, a lot of the stuff just kind of splattered out. So that's crazy. 3 by 5 miles is 15 square miles, which is a huge amount of space for debris to go. So sorry, going back to some fun, interesting facts, is that the ship's band kept playing music right until the very end, just to try to calm the passengers on board. So they died with the ship, but they kept playing. One of the ship's cooks, people say it was the baker, but I'm not sure. That was just one thing I read. Was able to survive much longer in the cold water than others because of the copious amounts of whiskey he drank before the ship sank.
Really?
Yeah, so he knew it was going down, so he just started chugging whiskey, and it kept him warm. I've actually heard that.
I'm not sure if that's a sound argument, because I'm pretty sure alcohol thins the blood.
Oh,
so you probably wouldn't be doing so well. That has to be a myth.
Oh, it could be. I remember hearing that like 15, 20 years ago too, but I don't know. Again, these are all like, we can't ask the guy, he's dead. But
yeah.
It's interesting that scientists think that actually the whole wreck could vanish by 2030 because there's bacteria under the water that's eating away at it. So if you look at some of the photos, it doesn't really look like a ship anymore. I know it's been like, of course, almost like 100 years, but or 100 years plus, but it's really kind of diminishing at a really quick rate. So the ship was supposed to be its maiden voyage of this luxurious cruise journey from left to right. So they really went overboard with everything. So back in 1912 numbers, the ship was carrying 15,000 bottles of beer, 1,000 bottles of wine, 850 bottles of liquor, 8,000 cigars, 75,000 pounds of fresh meat, 7,500 pounds of bacon,
Huh.
36,000 oranges, 1,000 loaves of bread, and 40,000 fresh eggs, which is a lot for only a couple thousand people, especially for like a short trip. I think it was going to be like a week or something like that. But in modern day cruise,
Sounds like they were having a good time on board until everything
until
collapsed.
everything or didn't until it collapsed. Um, so here's something really interesting. This is goes to our MBA business minds. Two
Hmm.
really famous business people were supposed to be on the ship, but in the end didn't go. Milton Hershey, who was the founder of the Hershey's chocolate
Oh,
empire, and JP Morgan. Back in the day, they had tickets to board, but because of other obligations, they didn't go on, and thankfully so. They said that JP Morgan was, this is a theory, the richest man on earth at that point. So if he had been on the ship, he would have been the richest man that would have perished.
the
But
deadest, richest man.
the deadest, richest man. But I guess I think I forget it was him or somebody or Hershey, but they took a boat earlier, like a different boat, and they were fine.
Can you imagine? I guess that's called survivor's guilt. Some people have that feeling.
Yeah. Well, you should watch the movie. That's a big part of the movie too, because
Is it?
it's they interview one. So the movie goes between the present and the past for one passenger, and it's Kate Winslet's character as an old lady versus Kate Winslet as herself. And so they interview her because she survived it, and so she talks about her experiences on board, and they use that as like a primary source. So it's interesting. I mean, but yeah, definitely the guilt would have been crazy because of what you saw and what you experienced. Um, uh, but I mean, imagine seeing people drown. I think that's got to be one of the worst ways to go, right?
Yep, I can imagine so.
Cold
But I
water.
mean, everyone who died or the Titanic, it was a drowning. It wasn't like one of the clips I do remember seeing was the ship turning on its side, and
Yeah,
then people just probably falling down and jumping off anyways.
yeah.
Maybe someone died from getting bludgeoned in their fall, but otherwise it would all be drownings, right?
Well, I don't want to be gruesome and insensitive, but like
Please do.
I mean, I guess they jumped because it was either like they took their chances in the water or they didn't. They knew something like they weren't going to survive, so they might as well go down. But but yeah, that water was cold, man. Like, I mean, -2 water is very cold.
I wonder how long that would take you to die at such a cold temperature in the water.
Yeah, I mean, it took Leonardo DiCaprio like 45 minutes in movie time, so I don't know in real time, but we can Google that. I mean, what's the coldest? Do you do like polar bear swims? Do you jump into lakes? Do you do cold water stuff or no?
No, I don't like discomfort in general, so I don't know why you would do such things.
Yeah.
But here in the Hague, there's a very nice beach, Scheveningen,
Hmm.
and every year, it's not a COVID year, they do a New Year's dip where
Oh yeah,
everyone runs into the water.
yeah,
But I'm in bed at that time.
yeah. Playing video games. Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, no, no. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, if I had to choose a way to go, I definitely would do that because not only are you drowning, but there's the fear of actually like being in some type of accident, which I think is incredibly scary. I don't know if you've been in any form of accident, but usually you're in shock and you're disoriented. But being on a boat in 1912 with the technology that you existed there, and just knowing that there was no room for anyone else or you might not survive is crazy. But like one thing I was really interested in is that like I find cruises to be very interesting, like not the actual cruise itself, but the fact that like this big ship can carry so many people and so many activities and so many
Hmm.
resources and just go around. I don't know if you ever been on a cruise? I've never. I'd like to go one day.
Have I been on a cruise? No, I don't think I have. No.
Is it something of interest?
No.
Again, you just want to stay in your bed.
I mean, I've taken I guess it's a ferry. I went from Helsinki to Tallinn, which was, I wouldn't call it a cruise, but it was a huge ship. It was
Okay.
massive,
Yeah.
and it was a 2.5 hour journey in fairly rough waters. But I can kind of see the appeal, but I can also see myself hating everybody on board and wanting to be jump off the side.
Oh, there was no
Um,
like there was no activities or anything on board for you?
Well, people were gambling, and the Finns were drinking heavily because as soon as you get on the ferry, it's cheap compared to
It's true.
Finland, and
Yeah.
Estonia is cheaper compared to Finland. So,
Uh,
gambling and drinking were the main things, which is, I
see,
guess, what lots of people do on cruises, anyways.
yeah, I think I've never
Um,
been, but based on my knowledge, is that like I think you got to pay for booze, but I think food is free on cruises, right? It's part of your ticket. So like when you go, you can have like unlimited shrimp if that's your thing, and then
I don't
it's
know.
very expensive.
I just these all inclusive things are like my worst nightmare. I just like being confined to one location,
100%.
being force fed what they're giving you.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
like freedom of movement, freedom of choice.
On
Not so much
land.
freedom of the buffet
Yeah.
line. There's a lot of choice there, but come on.
Yeah, food's not a big motivating factor for me anymore. So like I don't mind. But one thing about cruises that really freaks me out is that things can spread like very quickly. When someone gets ill, illnesses can go around very, very quickly. And that was the
Yeah,
case with COVID on that boat, the Princess something something. Do you remember last year that like that boat had to just sit out for outside like port for like so long, that Japanese cruise liner, because COVID was like pretty much on board and they couldn't dock.
yeah. And these
Uh,
people were stuck in their tiny little cabins, which they are meant to just at normal times go there to sleep
yeah,
and then party outside the rest of the time.
yeah,
But then they spent their entire cruise locked away.
yeah.
So it goes against my claustrophobic nature, and um, yeah. And then I just experienced cruise travelers in Dubrovnik and Venice,
It's not
and
your
they're
thing.
like destroying beautiful cities. So no, thank you.
That's true. Excuse me. I live in a city that's a port city and a cruise city, I guess, and so you'll see really, really big boats come in and travelers come off and kind of like on board for the day or whatever it is. I would like to take a cruise just once on a sunny part, or maybe even the cold part. I did like the Alaska part, just to see what it's like, so I can kind of check it off my list. But I kind of feel like you in the sense that I think after a while you'd be super bored, right? Like other than just eating and like watching movies, which I can do anyways in my house. Like, what else there really is there to do? But some of these places might be beautiful, like geographically and scenically. I'm sure the Alaskan pathways are really beautiful, or the Caribbean, or kind of like the eastern coast of America. No.
No, the well, the ones that scare me are, I guess it's the case with Alaska, but
Yeah.
some family members, they really like going on cruises, and they go to there's one off the coast of Norway,
Oh yeah.
and they have brutal storms there, like really horrible things where,
Oh wow.
you know, we talked about it a couple weeks ago where there was a ship that had to be rescued
Yeah.
off the coast of Norway, and it basically capsized. The power went out. These North Sea storms are brutal. So the brochures that you get
Yeah.
to go look at the fjords are so pristine and so calm and quiet. But that's once you're kind of inside inland a little bit. But the getting in and out part, once you're off the never shredded wheat western part of Norway,
Yeah.
it's pretty rough.
Do you think they build cruise ships like to withhold or withstand some of these rough waters? Like they
Yeah, of
know that.
course, but Mother Nature, it doesn't mess around. It can do some crazy things.
How do you think they build cruise ships that big nowadays? Like I was watching this Discovery Channel thing on how it was made, and it just fascinated me, like how like some of the modern cruise boats, the cruise ships, are just like so advanced technologically, and they can be all controlled by computers and this and that. But it's amazing to think like that stuff is being like because planes are also amazing, but cruise ships are bigger than planes.
Yeah, and even now, like some of these oligarchs, they have their own yachts, and the
Yeah,
yachts are so big, like they have their own kind of
like zip code.
competition amongst the
Yeah,
1% to see who can have the biggest yacht.
yeah.
And actually, in the Netherlands and Germany, there's some huge. I think a lot of them are built here,
Oh, really?
and it was quite interesting on my commutes to my former job.
Yeah,
I take the train from The Hague to Amsterdam,
yeah.
and on the way, halfway, you could see one of the shipbuilding yards.
Yeah,
And at one point, they were building definitely an oligarch yacht, and this thing was huge.
huge.
And it's just being they're just like working away at it. And I don't know. The thing probably had a helipad. You could land a helicopter on it.
Yeah,
Its own little like safety elements on the sides. I
yeah.
mean, they're not messing around, these oligarchs, right, with their safety and security. So they have all the bells and whistles.
When I was living
Um,
in Turkey, like in the Mediterranean, it was summertime, COVID, and even though people were not supposed to be traveling, people were. We went to Bodrum, which is like a very famous Turkish beach
hmm,
town, and you could see all these like massive ships in the harbor because I guess you could just they traveled within the Mediterranean to all the different countries. These rich people, and like you said, these some of these ships are like 15 houses put together. They're huge and they're so nice, like from the outside, but I don't know how fun it is really in the inside. Like I don't, you know what I'm saying? Like yeah, it's
I think a yacht. I could deal with a yacht. The what I have done is a catamaran,
what's that?
and that's cool.
Tell me what that is. I don't
Um,
know. I mean, I've heard the
I
word,
don't
but I'm
know if
not
I
sure
can
what.
explain it. Well, it's basically
You'll have to verbally
it,
explain to our listener.
yeah, that's the challenge with this thing.
Well, we can put a
Uh,
picture up afterwards too. But it's a small. Try your best.
It's basically like a small sailboat,
Okay.
or no, big sailboat, small yacht,
Okay.
and it goes on the water at pretty high speeds,
Yeah.
and it's of a size where you can hold maybe 20, 50 people max.
Oh, okay. That's all.
And you don't go massive distances. You kind of go around the coast of some
So
destination, some area,
you can
and it's
sleep on the boat.
basically meant for day trips,
Oh,
I think.
day
Yeah,
trips. Okay. Okay. So it's
yeah,
not like an
yeah.
overnight thing.
Probably you could do an overnight. I'm not sure I would want to be in a catamaran overnight in case of storms.
Yeah.
But yeah, I
Are
think
you are
it
you
was kind of cool.
Are you one of these people that you'd go on boats like into harbors for the day? That's okay with you, or if you had like a sleeping space on a boat, you could sleep, or no, you're not a boat person because one thing I don't like boats. Like I don't really go on boats that often. But I mean, I wouldn't mind. I could
Do you
try.
get seasickness? Because some people, like
No,
when I was on this catamaran thing,
yeah.
there was one couple where they spent the entire time with their like head in between their legs because they were going to be sick
Oh,
and had to ask the boat to turn back.
oh no
And I
way.
thought, what's wrong with you? Like, there's nothing really going on here.
Yeah.
But some people are affected by it a lot more.
No, I'm not seasick and I'm pretty comfortable in the water. Like, I mean, like, it's not like I jump into the ocean, but if I fell in or if I had to, if something happened, like, I'm a pretty good swimmer. So, like, I'm not bad. But, like, boat travel is not my preference in terms of like travel. I mean, taking a ferry from one side to the other or whatnot. But, like, I remember in high school, we were on a camping trip and our camping trip was on a boat. And so, like, a bunch of like the guys were in one corner and like one section of the boat, the girls on the other section and like it was really just a horrible experience. We all had to share one wash, like the boys all shared one washroom. They made us like take shifts in the middle of the night to go onto the deck to make sure everything was okay, which I thought was strange because it wasn't like pirates were going to take over this like boat full of high school kids in the middle of like
Yeah,
Vancouver. But
just discipline.
yeah, so like I didn't really find anything about boat travel really enjoyable, to be honest. It's just like camping, which I don't like either. Like I'm not really an outdoorsy person. Like I like sunshine and like walking, but boat travel to me just doesn't seem fun. Like I mean, and if I had like if you became rich, Dave, and you owned a boat in the Mediterranean, and you're like, hey, Tosh, do you want to spend the afternoon on our boat? And I'd be like, yeah, that's cool. Well, we could do that.
That's cool. Yeah, yeah,
But
okay.
it's like, hey, Tosh, do you want to sleep on the boat while we stay here for 6 days? I'll be like, no, I don't want to do
No,
that.
thanks. Yeah, and I'm gonna go into a more gruesome question because it got me thinking. Because the Titanic, I keep looking at your background.
Yeah,
Like the people who died, it was of hypothermia, probably not drowning
yeah,
necessarily. They just probably froze to death. A lot of them.
yeah.
Um, but I think maybe that would be preferable to
Ooh, that is
ending up
gruesome.
capsized in the Pacific Ocean where there's sharks all around you.
Oh,
I would freak the hell out if I was in deep waters in the Pacific. You
yeah,
just know the sharks are going to get you one time. That's
yeah.
going to be a much worse way to go.
So
I think I would pick that option.
it's sharks over hypothermia. Sharks versus
Yeah,
hypothermia.
hypothermia for sure.
That's a great question. I don't even know what I do. Sharks are scary. I go hypothermia because at least I can
Because the
control it.
fear,
Yeah,
it plays in your head. You're just like on this calm. You could be in totally calm
and it's
waters.
like a
Nothing's
fin.
happening.
Yeah.
You're just there bobbing around, and you look around for miles around and just wait for the fin to come get you.
Yeah, totally.
So maybe the fear would I'd have a heart attack before the shark would get me, or maybe.
Yeah. Do you think I definitely agree. I think hypothermia over over shark attacks. Sharks, by the way, I used to be really scared of, like, I'm still obviously very scared of sharks, but it's warm water, right? Like if you're in super warm water for sharks, I don't think they go like I'm on the Pacific where Vancouver is, but we don't have sharks where we are because it's too cold. So like I think you got to be more like Hawaii-ish or like southeast, like last week's episode of like the people
Yeah,
like
around there.
that kind of area. What do you think about like this fact? Like I don't know if you're like a kind of Indiana Jones interested archaeology. Like there's stuff on the bottom of the seabed, which is kind of interesting, eh? Like man-made things that just lie there, like ships, boats, planes, all these artifacts, and they just sit there. And it was weird if you watch these videos. So like when they send these probes down to Titanic, like they can actually like some of these probes are like remote controlled, and they can actually like go through like the rooms of the Titanic and stuff.
Wow.
And there's like photos and video of like dolls,
Oh,
violins, okay, minus the dolls, but like like just stuff that's still like been intact down there for like X number of years because it's the water's preserving it. It's like it's just it's weird, right? The stuff is
but
down
who's
there.
funding that kind of? That's a very expensive archaeological
It's probably those
expedition.
oligarchs who are building their own boats. Uh, uh,
Yeah, maybe.
Jeff Bezos paid like some crazy amount of money to pick up a space like related. Uh, I forget what it was. Like when the spaceships go up, they like sometimes they like they'll release parts of their ship and it'll hit the ocean and might even
So
be a
he
capsule.
bought some garbage.
Yeah, he
Yeah.
bought some garbage and now it's in like the Smithsonian or something. But he paid for this
Okay.
exhibition, which is crazy. So I know James Cameron, the guy who made Titanic, is like a huge Titanic buff, and I think he's been
Mm.
down in a little sub, and he really loves it and does that kind of stuff. But it's people who have excess money. But do you think there's an advantage to learning about like history and wreckages and archaeology, or that's a waste?
Well, maybe not, but I think
We're learning so much about Dave in this episode. I think this is the
I'm
most
just I'm
relieving,
just I'm
revealing
just
episode.
super apathetic right now with everything. But I think it's important to understand like what's going on in the
Yeah,
deep sea and the ocean floor. I think
yeah,
that there's not too much going on that we know about. They say like we know more about what's going on in the moon than we do at the bottom of the
totally.
oceans.
Does it?
Um, so
Have you ever
definitely
been?
more to be done there.
Are you like if you had the ability to like be a marine biologist or the opportunity to just go down there in a sub or whatnot, would you take that option or no? Check it out.
No.
Just
I
because of
I'm
safety.
claustrophobic.
Yeah,
I don't like that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
I'll do some snorkeling. I'll
Oh,
go along the surfaces and I'll tell them what I can see from there.
you're gonna snorkel on top of the Titanic wreckage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. We can put you in a swimming pool. That'll be.
Oh,
We'll throw some stuff at the bottom. Have you? Is that a
uh,
thing? Diving, snorkeling, are those things that interest you, or not really? Like I know you said snorkeling, but diving? Are you a diver? Or have you divin,
Divin. I
dive?
haven't divined to dive. Um, no, I think maybe it's something I could do to like tick a box because you could probably go do it around here somewhere in the Netherlands to do
Yeah,
some diving.
you were surfing right
Um,
last year, weren't you?
but I
Before
like
COVID?
surfing. I think that's
Yeah,
cool. Um, yeah, I kind of like to be in some measure of control over my movements and actions.
yeah,
And I think even when you're diving, if something goes wrong, you can't just like speed up to the top. Otherwise, you get what's it
the
called,
bends.
myxomatosis or something, the bends.
Yeah,
Um, so that again gets crossed off the list. I'm just very risk averse in general. So
yeah. Do you think that's
uh,
because with age, or you've always been that way?
I've always been that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? Interesting. Very, very
Mm.
interesting. I'd like to. My sister dives. My middle sister, or the one like my older sister who's younger than me, but
One
the
of
other
them.
one.
Yeah.
No, she dives and she dives here, and she goes on like in like Vancouver, and there's all these like places she goes, and it looks cool. But I have a fear. Like it's kind of weird to be like if you go to some tropical beach and you're on holiday, and people are like, oh, you want to dive in this like tourist area, and we'll teach you, and I'd be like, yeah, that's fine. But like, I don't really want to dive in the ocean, like in like some like cold place where it's dark outside. Sometimes when you go to some of these resorts, they have night diving. I don't know if you've ever seen it. And I'm like, why would anyone want to go in the
Ooh,
ocean in the middle of the night?
that would give me nightmares for sure. Yeah,
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 because it's dark. Like you're not supposed to be in the ocean in the nighttime. And they're like, you can see the stingrays and all the night fish. And I'm like, I'm good.
yeah. I'm good. Yeah, I got the Discovery Channel over here.
Yeah. What about like are you what about in terms of like archaeological finds on top of the like on land around the world? Are you interested in anything like that? Uh
Yeah, that stuff's more interesting to me. I mean, um, even in the walks we go on around the park here,
yeah.
there's little World War II artifacts kicking
Really?
about in some places. Yeah.
That's cool.
So, and there's parts where there's bricks and paths you can see,
Okay.
and then you start realizing it's actually part of like a Nazi construction site that they had here.
So without going into like extensive detail, what was the role of the Netherlands in World War II? Like the Nazis
Well,
obviously
they were
came in.
occupied by the Nazis, and
Yeah.
so where I live
Yeah.
right now is a bomb site, basically.
Whoa.
Um, it was bombed by accident by the British because they were
Yeah.
trying to take out in the park just 5 minutes this way.
Yeah.
There was a Nazi, I think V2 bomb launch site. So they were
Yeah.
firing rockets into the UK, into
Yeah.
London or whatever from here.
From
And
here.
that was obviously pissing off the Brits. They flew in to try and take it out. They missed and blew up my neighborhood.
No way.
And then in the park over here, they also had this, they call it like the Atlantic Wall and this whole kind of defense fortification system.
Yeah.
And if you go to the beach, there's all these like pillboxes along the beach, and they're Nazi pillboxes so they could defend the coastline of any invasion.
Wow.
And so they don't do them anymore because of COVID, but you could go and do like tours of the bunkers.
No way. That's
Um,
cool. And
yeah, yeah.
who takes care of all that? Who preserves all this stuff? It's like your Ministry of
I don't really think they're like that preserved. They're just basically closed off. You can't go walking and poking around normal time, but they organize it. I think they
yeah.
kind of just let it sit there.
I think if
Um,
you're like a war like a history buff, Europe is fantastic for this kind of stuff
yeah, there's
because
tons of stuff for
there's
sure.
tons of it. Um, uh, I was always interested in the Indiana Jones related stuff, like treasures and things around the world. And I read this book like 7 years back called The Lost City of Z, or Z, depending on if you're American or Canadian. But it was pretty much it was a true story about this guy who was obsessed with finding the city of gold in the Amazon. The I think it was called El Dorado or something like that.
Yeah.
Uh, but there's a legend, right? There's a city made of gold where the Mayans or the native people lived, and et cetera, et cetera. And this is a true story. This guy spent his entire life. I'll post the book after. Just going into the Amazon, trying to look for the city, getting lost, getting sick, getting dehydrated, finding his way out, recouping, and going back and forth until one day he just never came back out again. And that
He
was
found
it.
it and he enjoyed it.
He found it and he
Um,
enjoyed it. Am I saying that right? El Dorado or the Lost City of
yeah,
Gold?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then
So
there's also Atlantis.
Atlantis.
We should check out where Atlantis is, and that's another option for
That's
some digs.
off limits for you, Dave. You're underwater, right? So
Yeah,
you're
but in a few years, when I've sold off my company for hundreds of millions, I'll fund some
you'll
exploration.
you'll excavate. You'll be like that rich billionaire who excavates like an entire city off the ground. It's actually like
Absolutely.
there's all these cool little things. If you go on YouTube, sometimes you can see that like in certain parts of the world, you can see cool little. Some artists are now putting statues and things under the water. That's their work of art. So like in one, it's kind of weird actually. In certain places, there's like a entire like little like you can actually in Indonesia, one place we went, there was like a statue under the water, and it was very popular in Bali or next to Bali, and you could snorkel, so you'd like it on top of it and look down, and you can see this cool
That's
little
better.
statue.
That's very
It was
nice.
literally like 10 feet below the ground, so you could probably stand up and be okay.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
so it's not as bad as Titanic,
Uh,
but yeah, so that was it, the Titanic thing, and they made a movie out of it. If you have 3.5 hours to kill and you want to watch the movie, go for it. You at least heard the song,
when's
right?
the sequel coming out? Yeah, the song. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I didn't go watch the movie because I'd probably have to enjoy the song as well. It was everywhere and anywhere in '97. There was Celine
Everywhere.
Dion singing everywhere.
Everywhere. An interesting fact as I close up the topic is that it cost more to make the movie than it did the ship. The movie cost $200 million to make all in. They actually built a replica ship, whereas as I said at the beginning of the episode, the actual ship cost 7.5 million. But the movie brought in like $2 billion. So like they definitely made their money back. But But
Well,
it's
next week episode we'll get James Cameron on to talk about how he went about it.
yeah. So that was it. Like I mean, with the Titanic thing. I mean, I think by the time in the next couple of years, they say that, like I was saying, that if bacteria keeps eating away, it'll vanish. So it might not be there for the rest of our lives. But it is interesting to think that during the last 150 years, there was this ship, and it's kind of sitting on the bottom of the ocean, and people have kind of checked it out, and it has a real historical significance in our world history. That sentence did not make sense. I put history twice, but you know what I mean. But
Absolutely.
but
Very interesting facts. I enjoyed the story very much, and it saved me again 3 hours of time watching the
yeah,
actual movie. So thank you very much for that, Toshio.
you're welcome. Anyways, Dave, I hope you have a good Wednesday. Thank you for your time. Thank you to our
I hope
listeners.
that you have a good Wednesday when it arrives for you.
It's it'll be soon. I mean, it kind of is, but I'm not going to actually technically be functioning until I
I don't
wake up.
count the day as the day until I've woken up from the previous day.
Huh, interesting.
That's just how I
So
conceptualize time.
the day starts when you wake up, right?
Yeah, I still think of like if I stay awake until 2 and 3 in the morning, I still think it's like
Yesterday.
Wednesday or yesterday. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so like technically, like most days, you wake up at like 8 or 9. That's when like the day starts for David Lewis. Like the previous 8 or 9 hours are from yesterday.
For sure.
What about if you go to bed early and then like you go to bed around 8 or 9? Does the day end at that point?
It's finished.
Oh, that's very deep. It's a very interesting way of looking at it. That's super. I guess. I don't know what you think, but like as I got older, like the sense of time has been kind of distorted for me. I don't know about you. I used to think like that, and like I used to have these like really really strict time limits and stuff. But now I sort of feel like whether it's 2 in the morning or 9 in the morning or whatever, like it's fine with me. I don't care. Like,
Whatever happens.
because I will tell you, as just not to go on, I do find there's a transition point where you feel like maybe you've been up for too long and it's weird. You know what I'm saying? Like sometimes there's that, like when you start to see the sunrise a little bit, or you see those first glimmers of light and you're still awake, you're like, something is like not right, in my brain.
Hopefully that doesn't happen too often.
No, it's very rare that that it happens. But I try to go to bed at a reasonable time. It's like the better way of putting it is like the nighttime is for sleeping, pretty much. And so, like, if you don't sleep,
Yeah, that's very deep.
yeah, if you don't sleep and you wake up, then you're like, the daytime's not for sleeping. Like, it's sort of like this. It sort of breaks everything down. That's why I don't really understand these people that like they have night shifts and they work at night, or they choose intentionally to stay up all the time at night and then they sleep during the day, because it really must throw off your rhythm, right? Like it must be just weird, just upside downing it.
Absolutely. All that and more in the sleep episode of Super Respectable.
There you go. Anyways, Dave, I hope you have a good day during the daylight hours. And
I hope you also have a good day when it happens.
Thank you so much. All right, Ben. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye.